Welcome back to Life's Toughest Innings. If you join me for episode 1, you'll know we travelled back to where everything began. My early childhood in a pre-post apartheid South Africa, a time full of love, contradictions, and moments that shaped the foundation of who I would become. Today, in episode 2, we move into the next chapter, the teenage years. A time when I stepped out of senior primary and into high school, and into a whole new set of challenges, expectations, and lessons. This is a story of 2 high schools, 2 completely different worlds, new cricketing challenges on and off the field, and one journey to find myself. As always, I'm Grant, so let's talk this path together. I guess the best place to start is kind of wrapping up my time at DPHS. I had obviously experienced what I experienced, and it was difficult. And, I kind of felt like I was leaving DPHS slightly stronger than when I started. And my experiences of the school over 4 or 5 years, I would say had been 50-50, 50% good and 50% bad. And I think the natural transition for me would be to go to a high school that I felt that I would be able to again try and fit in, and where a majority of my friends were going. And I was fortunate through my sort of sporting success to be awarded a sports scholarship to Durban High School, so more commonly known as DHS. A high school steeped in tradition, fantastic history, and again, a record that speaks for itself in terms of turning out South African cricketers. I think, still to this day, they have one of the highest amount of South African cricketers that went to that school. So for me, it felt, right to go to that school for those reasons. And I was nervous because, you're going in as a 13, 14-year-old to high school. There's kids there that are going to be double your size, 4 or 5 years older than you. So, you were feeling a sense of trepidation. But high school, it's that awkward stage where you're supposed to figure out who you are, even though you barely understand the changes happening inside you. And I was battling at that time. And, my teenage years began with a transition, from senior primary, that was a strict, unforgiving and unrelenting environment. Discipline came before understanding, order came before individuality. So I remember walking on my first day into the premises of Durban High School, a big school, 3 times bigger than what DPHS was in terms of the building size, the premises, and I was really, really nervous. I was wearing the uniform with pride. Obviously, Mum dropped me off on my first day, and she was in tears, bless her. And as I walked in, I had agreed to meet a couple of my friends from DPHS. Let's walk in together. Let's not walk in on our own. And that was probably the best thing, was to walk in together and not on your own. Especially because the elder kids who had been there a couple of years, or the last year matrics, if you like, they were there waiting for you. They were ready to kind of call you out and and see who you were to begin with. They were kind of scoping you out and seeing if if there was potential for them to lay down the law as such, being, the final year students. And I guess, any person that's been to high school and on their first day they would have experienced something similar. Again, I feel, and I felt at the time that, that was a difficult experience, and I feel it's the wrong thing. I don't think any high school should be allowing certain last year or final year students to be there heckling, the new kids, so to speak. I was obviously met by a couple of prefects. They were obviously checking my uniform, and they were guiding us where to go. And so we went, and we were sat down in a hall, and we were just getting ready basically for our first assembly. And I was amazed at the school hall. It was just a decoration. There was so many boards up of famous names. I mean, I was looking at a couple of names, and one of the names that really stood out for me at the time was a South African cricketer by the name of Lance Kloosner. And he obviously went to DHS. So, sitting down, I was excited, but I was nervous, and I'd experienced, or had my first experience of what high school was going to be like. And again, I was worried about my academics. I wasn't worried about my sporting capabilities. It was more the academic side of things. And again, they don't make it easy for you, in the sense that, it was an uphill battle. Teachers doubted me, and there was a lack of faith, because the teachers entrusted to help you improve your academics. I felt like, particularly at DHS, I felt like I was a burden to them, and they couldn't be bothered to see me improve or help me improve. And obviously throwing in, poor self-confidence, that feeling of being different, it does then become a bit of a storm. So throughout my time at DHS, I did battle, and it was more of a self-confidence thing. I had braces on my teeth to help my teeth become straighter, if you like, well presented. And obviously there was the issue that I'd always had with my hair, and through all this, I always had the voice of my parents always encouraging me, always urging me to ignore the negativity and to forgive, to rise above, and hopefully the lessons that I was learning would shape my future. So naturally, I started in the A side with cricket, and surprisingly, I represented the A side in rugby. Now, I wasn't a big rugby player. It didn't come naturally to me. I think what I had on my side is that I was tall, and DHS at the time had secured so many wonderful young sportsmen from around KwaZulu-Natal. And I mean, I remember, the A-side cricket and rugby was just full of sports scholarship receiving players. And, it was great because, you were surrounded by, people with equal or better talent. And it kind of, it drove me to want to get better. And unfortunately, at the time, the coach of the under-14A didn't fill me with confidence. Naturally, I think with school coaches, they had their favourites, and he definitely did. And again, given that he was still playing club cricket in Durban at a high level, I guess he felt that he knew a lot about the game. and he just didn't enjoy my method, if you like, of playing. So he dropped me to the B team. It was the first time I'd ever been dropped, and I didn't know what to do. I remember going home crying to mum and dad, because I thought, well, I've got a scholarship. I'm purposely here to improve my cricket, and I was part of this group, if you like, of under 13, under 14 that had all gone on to represent under 13, KZN. So I kind of felt now that I was the odd one out, and those players were looking at me saying, "Oh, he's not good enough," and just all those kind of feelings and sensations that you would experience as a young 13, 14-year-old. I guess coupled with that, I was still sort of experiencing bullying and racism, and I remember one day at school, it was war cry practice. Now, for those of you who know, rugby in South Africa is absolutely sacred, and every school has ruling that you have to attend to watch the first team on most home fixtures, which I think is great because it's a tradition, and you get there to support your team or support your school, and you build that love, not just for your school but for the sport. And we always used to have war cry practices, and you only had a small amount of time to get from your lesson to the sports field to start war cry practice, to enable you then to potentially have a lunch break. So it was very strict in getting there as quick as you could during your war cry practice. And if it wasn't to the standard of the people who were entrusted to run the war cry practice, so like the prefects or someone in the last year who specialized or wanted to take on that role, they made you stay behind after school until you got it absolutely spot on. And I remember kind of walking down at a good pace to get there, and there was a group of seniors, if you like, 17, 18-year-olds. They were in matric, which is the final year in South Africa. And I remember, to get to where I needed to be, I had to walk through them. And I remember one of them pulling me into the circle that they had created. And just out of nowhere, they just started slapping me on my head, on my back. And it was absolutely traumatizing, to the point where I started crying, because it wasn't just, being physically harmed. It was, the fact that I'm 14 against these 18-year-olds who were obviously double the size, and their strength was far greater than mine. And I remember I didn't attend that war cry practice. I ran straight up to go and find one of my teachers. When I went to the staff room, I was kind of brushed aside by some of the staff, some of the teachers, who were just more interested in having their own lunch break. And then one of the prefects, who I had a lot of time and respect for, came and spoke to me, and he said, "I've just seen what's happened. I'm sorry. I've spoken to the main culprits. What would you like to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm obviously not happy about it." So he referred it to the headmaster. And, I went to go and speak with the headmaster. Again, I was trying to compose myself. And I went and I spoke to him, and he said, "Listen, he will look into it." So a couple of weeks had passed and nothing had been done. So my mum came to the school and came to visit, the headmaster, and he only then took action. And I just couldn't believe that I had to experience that. And, I think the action taken towards the culprits, I mean, it wasn't, it could have been a case of lay a charge, but, again, we were encouraged not to, and the school would deal with it in-house. When I look back, it was the wrong thing to do, because it showed me that, I felt that I was undervalued. And again, it was the highest level of bullying, and it wouldn't stand today. And again, DHS kind of prided itself on its discipline and how its students treat each other. But again, I was experiencing bullying, I was experiencing racism. And again, to go home and tell my parents about this and see how upset they got, really, again, made me upset. And, a decision had to be made, and the decision taken to leave DHS and go to another school was difficult, because, again, I had my friends there from DPHS, and although I wasn't really enjoying my sport, I felt like I could improve and come back and make the A-team representative again, if you like. So the decision was taken that I would go to Northwood. Now, Northwood's in Durban North, a completely different area to Berea, and it was literally 5 minutes down the road from where we lived. So it made sense to go to Northwood, and it was a newish high school. It was a high school that had amalgamated with two former high schools, so Northlands and Beechwood. And, it was slowly getting a good reputation. And again, there were some former friends, if you like, from my Durban North days of when I went to Northway Junior Primary, and again, it felt right. And I had already made a friend through the sort of extra coaching lessons that I was going to from the ex-Natal and Leicestershire all-rounder Paddy Clift, who was a fantastic cricketer, and he had an academy based in Durban North at a sports club called Crusaders. And Crusaders, for those who don't know, is the old boys club to Northwood. And, that's where I made probably one of my best friends through high school. And again, I remember my first day. I had asked my friend to meet me at the front gates, and he would walk in through me, and it was kind of a different feel to DHS. It didn't feel, as intense, and I was lucky that I knew a couple of people from playing cricket with and against, and I was fortunate that I had a scholarship or a bursary to go there. And I was quietly confident that I could make it work here. So I think my first couple of years I really enjoyed. I was in the A-team cricket. I made the North Durban representative team to go and play in a similar tournament to the under-13 tournament. And again, there were some serious cricketers who were there, some that had gone on to play international cricket or first-class cricket. But it's still, I was suffering with this self-confidence issue. And again, it was the academic pressure. Then throwing in the girls' situation. So I always felt that I never thought that girls noticed me. I felt awkward, shy, and deeply sort of insecure about the way I looked. And And, oddly enough, the few interactions I did have were with girls who were more sort of confident, more dominant, and, which only sort of heightened the confusion. It was a strange balance between wanting to belong and not knowing how to. Again, academically, things weren't easier. It just felt like an uphill battle as time went on. And, at Northwood, again, there were teachers who doubted me academically. I was very fortunate that I had some good coaching from a former Natal cricketer and rugby player by the name of Grant Bashford. And, he, I wouldn't say took me under his wing from a cricket perspective, but he definitely helped improve me. And to have that experience of someone who's played at one of the highest levels really, really helped me, because up until that point, I'd only really had one coach, but he wasn't really a cricket coach. He was more of a rugby coach. And so it was nice to have Mr. Bashford, because he really, really helped me with my cricket. And, as time went on, again, just trying to fit into the regime and, get into a good routine. I think one thing I found really helped me was getting into a routine. And it was difficult sometimes, because, when you're on the sports field straight after school, to go home and then open your books to try and do some academics, some homework, it was difficult. I mean, I remember I had a school project and I left it to the last minute. I don't know why, but I left it to the last minute, and to the point where it came to the day where you would hand your project in, and it was for 100 marks or something like that. And I didn't have mine. And the teacher rang my parents, and my mum and dad gave me an absolute rollicking for it. And so for that entire night, I think I only went to bed at 12 o'clock. For that entire night, my mum sat up with me and helped me do it. And, bless her, she was so angry with me. But I managed to do it. And I think we did something like 15 pages in about 3 hours. It was some good work. And I handed it in the next day, and I think I got 75 or 80 marks out of 100, so 80%, which I was very, very happy about. So I guess, despite everything, every doubt, every sort of insult, every barrier, I was determined to prove my teachers wrong. And, Mum, bless her, she went and she got a teacher to help me do some extra lessons, if you like. And there was evidence that this was helping. And it's difficult, because I think when you're in a classroom environment and you don't want to come across as being stupid or thick, or other kids interpreting you to be thick or stupid. But it did affect me, and I didn't feel confident enough to approach my teachers at that time, and it was the wrong thing. It was the wrong thing when I look back. I should have just gone and asked questions and basically demanded that that they help me with this, because I was really, really battling. Again, unfortunately, at Northwood, I was experiencing bullying and racism. Again, people were questioning my ethnic sort of background because of my hair. And again, bless my mum, she spent hundreds and hundreds of rands on, for me to go and get my hair treated, so my hair would look straight, if you like, and not curly. And again, as a young 15, 16, going on 17, my body started to change. So I was experiencing a lot of, physical changes, and obviously with that comes mental changes. And I think the hardest thing is when you're changing mentally and you've got kids who are not kids, but young adults, teenagers, completely picking apart your appearance. And again, when you raise these issues, or when my family raised these issues with the school, they did nothing. They did absolutely nothing. And it was, again, an environment where you didn't want to grass on anybody. You didn't want to tell on anyone. And, if you did that, you were perceived to be weak, and, you couldn't fight your own battles, and you were always encouraged to suppress your feelings. And again, that was the wrong thing. To encourage a young boy, a young man, to suppress his feelings when he's going through so much, and a lot of these people didn't know what I was going through, was the wrong thing. What needed to happen was for it to all come out and be addressed. So I would feel like those issues were dealt with and I could just move forward. And I didn't feel like I could move forward. I recall going to a party once, and I felt like I'd made an effort to try and look good. And all my friends, school friends, if you like, had also tried to make the effort to look good. I can't remember what the dress style was back in then, but coming from Durban, there was some form of surf wear involved. I can remember. And naturally, there were the girls from the girls' high school were there. Northwood is an all-boys school for about 1,200 boys, and in a 5-mile radius, we had 3 girls' high schools. So in terms of the availability or meeting girls, they were always going to be there. And again, I battled. I was shy. There were a couple of girls who showed interest in me, and they were kind of the dominant kind of characters that were encouraging me to do things I didn't really want to do. And again, because I didn't do what they wanted me to do, I was perceived as weak. I was questioned whether I was gay. And again, these things that a young boy, young man has to face, it's difficult. It's difficult, and it's it should never have to happen to any young boy, young man. At the end of the day, if they're not comfortable doing certain things, then I think that needs to be respected. And it wasn't in my case. It was almost like, right, well, if you're not going to do this to me, I'll go find someone else who will. And it was very, very heartbreaking. But also, again, it made me question my value. And I actually ended up asking myself, well, what's wrong? All my friends are doing this. Why am I not doing this? I got to 17, and I was again in the first team cricket, and I was given this opportunity to go and do a school exchange in the UK. So the school that ran this exchange program with Northwood was called Downside School in Bath, and it was an absolutely beautiful school. Any of you who know Bath itself, it's an old Roman city, and the school itself had some fantastic facilities. And it was the first time I experienced indoor training, because most of the training I had done had been outdoors, obviously given the weather. So to train indoors was a weird kind of first experience. So it was a 3-month exchange program, and it was an opportunity to go and experience a new culture, a new school system, And it was the first time I had experienced the UK not in a holiday capacity, but unknowingly, this was going to be a place that I would one day call home. And, the schoolmaster who was in charge of the exchange program, he had initially only asked for one. And, the school had asked me, well, it was mainly Grant Bashford who approached me. And he said that, I think this would really benefit you, not just from a cricketing perspective, but from a person perspective. And looking back, I agree. And I'm very thankful and grateful for him putting my name forward. Again, the headmaster of Northwood at the time was a bit skeptical because of my academics. But the view was to send one, and in the end, they sent three because two others felt like they wanted to kind of, I wouldn't say jump in, but they kind of felt like, well, why haven't I been approached to go? And especially with one individual who joined me, I remember his dad kicking up a fuss that he wasn't going. So in the end, there was three of us. And, again, at Downside, I did have a sense of sort of being freer, being seen and being valued. And again, it did show what education could be. And it opened a door in my mind, basically. Maybe there's a different kind of life out there for me. And again, I to begin with, I didn't experience any racism. And again, I made a lot of friends, and some of them I'm still in contact with today. The one thing, surprisingly, I battled with was with my cricket. And I think it was because of the nature of the conditions. On most days it was cold. On most sort of game days, the pitch was, completely different to what I experienced in South Africa. And, to get used to those environments takes a bit of time. So to be able to do it in 3 months was asking quite a lot of a 17-year-old. But I still enjoyed the experience, and, the actual facilities of the school were just exceptional, and a lot of the students that attended that school were very fortunate, because I can only imagine what the school fees were. And again, we had kind of an affiliation with a girls' school in Bath, and a couple of weekends we went out in Bath and we would meet up with groups of girls. And again, some of the girls were completely different to the South African girls I had met or experienced. And they were more, how can I say, less forceful, but they were just fascinated that we were from a different country, that we sounded different. And we had some good evenings, and it was my first experience as a 17-year-old trying cider, and it wasn't the best experience. So to have a pint of cider as a 17-year-old who has never been encouraged to drink, never been encouraged to do drugs, and never did, do that whilst in South Africa. It was a very different experience, different culture, if you like. But it was great to experience that at such a young age, because I think that again paved the way for when I would eventually move to the UK and make the UK my home. So returning home from that, my confidence had improved, and I had probably one of the best years of my life at high school as a 17-year-old. The year was 1999, and I did feel a shift in how things were going to change for me, but change for the good. So in 1999, I was selected for the Natal Schools under-17 team. We went to Port Elizabeth for that national tournament. And again, some of my team members, we'd gone on to actually end up playing professional cricket against. And one of my team members, he went on to play for Leicestershire. And, we had this cricketing battle on the field since we were young kids. So to be able to represent your province at under 17 or under 19 level, and then go on to play professional cricket against each other, I think it's a fantastic story. So again, to be selected for the Natal Schools, despite the politics, the favouritism, the coaches who backed players who never went anywhere in the game, I felt really, really proud of that achievement. I was heading into my kind of final year of high school, and I was nominated to be a prefect, which again, I think for anyone who's done high school in South Africa, to be a prefect, I think it's a nice honour, and again, it's recognition that you have been one of the more well-behaved students, and obviously you've represented the school well on and off the sports field or in the cultural kind of sector of the school. But again, it's being a prefect, it's almost like the younger students would look up to you, and you would have to become a role model, if you like. I was also grateful that I was selected as the vice captain for the first team. So I was pretty much living my best life I'd ever lived during my school career, and I think what made it also extra special is that, for my last year, I spent that year of high school with my younger brother by my side. But even then, the bullying, it didn't stop for either of us. And my brother did experience bullying and racism throughout his school career. And they were painful times, because I don't think either of us knew how to communicate that, not just to the people at the school, but my parents. And, me and my brother, we leaned on each other, and because we understood what we were going through. And it was difficult because, especially as an elder sibling, when you're an elder sibling, the expectation of you is to look after your younger siblings, naturally, and I get that. And I wanted to do that. Of course I wanted to do that. But leaning on each other, this is what sort of our resilience really meant, and my resilience, because not only was I experiencing what I was experiencing, the difficulties in the classroom, out of the classroom, racism, bullying, and obviously I was trying to improve my cricket, because I really, after being to downside, I really wanted to make cricket a career. And again, there were some speed humps, and certain people trying to put blockades in my way, if you like. And I've never been one of those people just to accept that. I would just go straight through that blockade. I didn't care what it did to me physically, mentally. I would just break through that blockade. And I think experiencing the sort of racism, it had come from, unfortunately, it had come from a group of old boys who were disappointed that I had left Crusaders to go and play for a team called African Warriors, which, it was an all-black cricket club. And, it didn't disappear because I got older. If anything, it changed shape. So, I was experiencing the usual teenage battles: insecurity, bravado, ego. But then there was these sort of deeper cuts, the racism that followed me from the classroom, in the corridors, onto the cricket field, and then off the cricket field by representing this all-black cricket club. For me, it was about identity, pride, and challenging myself, because I wanted to be challenged within the game. I wanted to play against first-class cricketers. I didn't want to play in the second team or the third team, because that wasn't just going to challenge me. And to be honest, I didn't enjoy the environment at the time. I wanted to play for this team, because also I had found a new mentor and cricket coach in former Natal cricketer himself, Rodney Malumba. And he would come to my house, and he would do one-on-one sessions, and he said to my dad, "I want Grant to come play." And again, I played with cricketers who went on to play first-class cricket, but then also I played with and against cricketers who went on to play international cricket. And one of those players was Kevin Peterson. And, he himself was also going through these identity struggles, and, South Africa was changing very quickly in terms of the dynamics and who was getting selected and who wasn't getting selected. And it didn't matter how talented you were. The transitional period was very difficult to understand. But again, which 17 or 18-year-old knows anything about politics, can understand it, and then make a decision which is best for him or her. But playing for African Warriors, it did challenge myself, and I think it made me resilient for the next step of my life. So things like getting prepared to write my final exams, getting prepared to leave high school and go out there and face the big wide world and the significant challenges. So again, I recall a moment where it was my final cricket game of my school career and for Northwood. Up until then, I tried to represent the school with honour and with distinction. I'd had some great performances. I wasn't a standout performer, but I had some significant highlighted performances, if you like, and I represented Natal schools and behaved, you would say, 95% of the time the way that was expected of me. And I just remember leaving this final game after party, if you like, where the old boys had come down and they had set up a barbecue and they were coming to support us for our final game. And what they were trying to do is do this link up between the old boys club and the school and reintegrate that connection, if you like, of right after school we want effectively the new old boys to come down to the club and obviously represent the club in the sports that it offered. But unfortunately for some of them, they drank too much, and as I was driving off with my dad, they had said something. And I just remember my dad. I've never ever seen my dad get upset. I just remember my dad putting the car into reverse and driving all the way right up to them and just giving them what he felt was justified for what they were saying. And it was a very, very hurtful thing because, again, a lot of it wasn't just aimed at me. It was aimed at my dad. And I just felt like it was a dirty way of trying to question who my dad was. And again, I'd experienced this right through my school career. I think, when I look back, I've had one good year of school out of 10. And one good year, and all along, I've had all these, we've all heard all the cliches and sayings that, school's the best years of your life. Well, for me, it wasn't. It really wasn't. And it was no surprise that the headmaster had completely written me off about passing my final exams. He completely dismissed my chances of gaining my matric certificate, which you need to say that you've finished school, you've completed school, you've got the pass marks that you require in order for you to go on to university or college. And he completely wrote me off. So when I sat there in this massive school hall writing my exams, I just thought, I can't let this happen. I don't want this to happen. I want to, again, prove people wrong who doubted me, doubted my ability. And, I did. Because I remember I was in the UK on a family holiday, and one of our good friends had phoned my parents at my grand's house to say that I had passed. My name was in the paper. My name had passed. So, yeah, that was a fulfilling moment, and a moment that I would kind of, highlight to anybody to say that, you're never out of the battle. You can do it. You can 100% do it. No matter who doubts you, no matter who thinks you haven't got the talent and ability, you can do that. And I'm glad I did. Not just for me, but for my parents, because I think my parents had experienced so much in such a short space of time with me growing up at school. And, again, going to establishments that you would think, well, I shouldn't have to experience what I experienced, but I did. So my final day leaving the school environment was, stepping into the doorway where I first kind of stepped into when I was joining Northwood, if you like, but I was leaving Northwood, and you would ring the bell to acknowledge that you had finished school, and again, they would only invite students who had passed. So that, unfortunately, if there were 2 or 3 who failed, they weren't invited to that ceremony, which I think is just shocking. Just because you haven't passed your academics doesn't mean you haven't completed school. You've done other things at school. You've made friends, you've played sport, you've got involved in the cultural side of school. And to not be invited because you've not achieved a certain pass mark, I just think is an absolute failing and a kick in the teeth. Especially if those parents of those kids have paid school fees. So the sort of cricketing dream, if you like, started to ignite within me. I'd finished school. I was playing Premier League club cricket, and I had a new mentor, and I felt that my game was improving, but it didn't suit me to stay in South Africa because of the climate change, if you like, from the political situation. Now, I admit I was never the level of certain players who were automatically graduating into professional cricket in South Africa. So I use Hashim Amla as an example because he was an exceptional talent. And of course, he was playing first class cricket when he was 16, so for us, trying to follow in his footsteps, it was difficult because, one, we didn't have his talent. 2, obviously he was pushed and pushed and pushed, and it worked out in the end. It worked out for him. It worked out for South African cricket. But also, there were significant changes going on. And again, I didn't understand it. I didn't want to be a part of that. And also I was very fortunate in the sense that I had a British passport through my mum. And those 3 months I experienced at Downside, I thought England and the UK is where I want to be. So then came a couple of opportunities that changed my life. So the first opportunity was a trial with the MCC Young Cricketers at Lords. So under the head coach Clive Radley, who is a former England cricketer, suddenly, netting at Lords, the home of cricket, if you like, on a trial, and having international cricketers look at you while you net on a trial, it felt very real and felt like my dream had started. And the feedback I had got was and I've still got the letter actually that he wrote to me from Clive Radley, is that you clearly are a very talented cricketer, but I would suggest you try and focus on getting straight onto a county squad. So he was almost saying, like, you're far too talented to join the MCC Young Cricketers, and you should concentrate getting straight onto a county staff, if you like. So with that in mind, that's what I tried to do. And this led to a pre-season trial at Somerset County Cricket Club in early 2001. And I remember me and my dad had taken the train from London, because what we tried to do, which made sense, was try and incorporate our family holiday with me going and doing this trial. And we were there for 3 or 4 days. We actually stayed in a house on the ground, which was formerly occupied by legends of the game, Lord Botham and Viv Richards. And rocking up there, and you look at the ground and the smell, and just, automatically just felt traditional, and it felt so good. You think, this is where you want to be. This is what you want to do. And I remember the head coach of Somerset at the time was Kevin Shine, and he took me for a fitness test. And I don't think I did very, very well, because I'd obviously had 3-week holiday, family holiday. I was obviously eating and drinking and enjoying myself. And I kind of got to use that moment that really spurred me on to improve my fitness, which, since then I've always kept myself fit and healthy. So there was that experience. And then the one evening when the entire Somerset squad was in doing pre-season training. So I remember facing Andy Caddick, and, again, facing him in the indoor nets was a bit of a difficult task. Having only watched him bowl in a test match a year before that in South Africa, I just thought, wow, what a great experience. And, he bowled a couple of good balls. He never got me out, but he made it very, very difficult for me. Plus, I faced a whole host of other good bowlers, and I remember one of the players who had always been very kind, very courteous, very supportive towards me was Mike Burns, and we got chatting, and obviously he was a friend of a family friend's member, if you like, and we were getting on really, really well. And obviously it was a proud moment for my dad, because my dad was there watching, and he just, you could see that he was really, really proud of me. And then this is quite a funny story, and I'm not sure if he'll remember this, but I remember being paired up to go and do the ball machine with former England opening batsman Marcus Trescothick, who was doing his preparations to go to Sri Lanka with the England team. And they said, Grant, do you want to pair up with Marcus and go and do the ball machine? So I was like, absolutely, 100%. And obviously Marcus went first, England player, and I'm just a young kid out of high school. And I remember before I'd even put the first ball into the machine, I dropped the bucket of balls and it went everywhere. And the whole indoor school and players all stopped and looked at me, and it was so embarrassing. But one thing that stood out for me, Marcus, he ran over and he helped me put the balls back in the bucket, which I thought was just such a nice thing. He could have been on the next best thing in the England cricket team and just leave me to do it, but he didn't. And after he had his round of facing, he then fed the ball machine for me. And again, to be stood inside, that environment, I had kind of expectations of what it would be like, and it was completely different. And I knew from that moment that my life was about to change, because this was the doorway kind of out of South Africa and into a future I never believed I could access, because the CEO at the time had offered me some terms to come over for the rest of the year, 2001 season. And I was well on my way from transferring from the teenage years, high school, into becoming a professional cricketer. So those were my teenage years. It wasn't just a phase of growing up. They were a battlefield, emotionally, academically, socially, and spiritually, But they were also the years that softened me in some places, strengthened me in others, and prepared me for a life that I never expected. So in the next episode, I'll dive into the moment where everything shifted in the journey into professional cricket and trying to build a new life in the UK and the challenges that awaited me there. So thank you for tuning in, and I really do hope that you will look out for the next episode. Thank you for talking this path with me today.